for the odd one out of the Blaster Master series. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Blaster Master Boy. And I hope you liked that intro cutscene because it's the only story we're getting until the end game, barring what's in the manual. So they literally just throw you into the main gameplay. And you might notice we're missing a bit of a tank section here for Blaster Master games. We'll get into why that is in a few moments. For now, the big control things to note is that the A button fires your main weapon, which is a small pistol, and the B button places bombs. You place down bombs to destroy environmental pieces to get power-ups and eventually find your way to the exit of any given level. You might think that sounds like another game series. You're correct. The power-ups you can find range from other bomb types to just straight-up power-ups for Jason here. These fall into three distinct categories: power-ups, offensive items, and just bombs, period. The three other bomb types you can pick up are the directional bomb, which sends an explosion down the line you're facing, the hyper bomb, which shoots out a radius in the 4 cardinal directions, there's one of them right there, and the super bomb, which we'll see way later down the line, that just sounds like a giant explosion. The main thing you're trying to do in every level is bomb the blocks down until you either find the key or reach the point in that level where a key is placed, pick it up, and then exits through the exit level that spawns once you collect the key. With that said, I recommend in the earlier levels taking your time to farm around looking for extra power-ups, namely of the limited power-up type. We've seen a couple of them even in this particular level. There's some lamps and some life preservers you can find that you can use from the pause menu, and those actively help you in your traversal. And there comes a point in the game where finding those is very hard, especially the lamps, and you're going to want to have them to get through specific level types. Those two items right there, by the way, were Jason power-ups. The P icon increases the range of your main gun, and the turbo boots increase Jason's walking speed slowly. I forget where it maxes out, but you eventually max out at like 4 times the speed. I forget how many it takes to get there, though. Otherwise, other power-ups you can find just in the level, that's our key, by the way, are some health ups. Like the little bullet-looking things are a single health point up. The E-tanks are full health restores. Shields protect you from damage, period. Things of that general nature. With that said, now we're on for the first boss of the game. This is a giant slime creature. It slowly tracks onto you and spawns mini versions of itself that do just the same. Nothing really more complicated than that. There's no real big movement to worry about here. It does get faster the further down you get its health pool, but you can just walk the perimeter and place bombs relatively frequently when it gets closer, and it should die pretty quickly. Don't be used to the bosses being this easy, because they don't stay that way, even starting from the second or third boss. Especially in terms of the damage they deal with contact. I'd say contact damage is your biggest fear with later bosses, because they can do upwards of like 4 bits of health down there on the bottom left. If anything, with some bosses like this, the bigger threat could be the timer on the bottom right. Because if that wears out, you do die instantly. Not that that's much of a threat, barring like maybe 2 stages in the game, period. But be careful all the same. But that said, now we're on to World 2. The worlds in this game are broken up into periods and sublevels, with an inconsistent amount of sublevels between them. But this level introduces the hazards you need to use the temporary items to get around. For instance, water. Jason can't swim in the game. If you're in water for too long, he sinks, and I'm not sure if it counts as a death or if it counts as just doing damage. Either way, you drown. But if you use a life preserver for a temporary period of time, you will be able to float on top of the water. Similarly, several levels, in fact basically every level moving forward, has underground areas that are dark you can enter. They usually just have extra items for you to grab, but in order to see in the dark, you need to use a lamp, which allows you to see in a limited field around Jason. Like the life preservers, though, they only last for a certain period of time, and you want to hold on to your lamps kind of something fierce, because there are levels later on in the game that are completely pitch black, and your only way you can see in them is either by using the lamps, or by using Jason's gun to just see whether or not there's a wall directly in front of you or not. And at that point, the lamp's going to help more navigation overall. So try to save up on lamps, but destroy enough in every level that you can at least try to find some extras. If anything, the timer's a bigger threat when you're trying to find items. There are also extra hidden rooms in most of the game stages, usually along the top of the screen, but we'll talk more about those when we eventually run into one. Something you should watch out for, though, in the early parts of the game, especially when you're getting used to the controls, is your own bombs. Because, say, an enemy in this stage, for instance, will do probably either less than a full health point of damage or a full health point. Your bombs will probably do about 3 to 4 bits of damage on your health out of the 6. It's ridiculous. It's the biggest threat to yourself. Similar to another series. We'll get into why in a moment. For now, let's read the story according to the game's manual. Not that there's much of one. This is a relatively early Game Boy game. I think this was 91 or 2, so first 2 or 3 years. It seems that radioactive energy is generating from deep within the Earth's crust and has begun to destroy plant life on the surface world. Jason knows that the plutonium boss has gained control and is wreaking havoc underground. In a fury, Jason rushes to his armored transport only to find the entrance to the underworld has shrunk and is not large enough to allow his vehicle to pass through. Jason collects as many bombs as he can carry and power-ups his gun and climbs down the dark passage alone. On his journey, he must blow up petrified pieces of rock to uncover more powerful bombs and extra power packs for his gun so that he can be ensured a victory over the mutated creatures underground. He must defeat all the mutant bosses to stop a mission of radioactive energy to the Earth's surface. Okay, so that at least explains why there's no Sophia. And it explains why the game plays a little differently. But I think the best way to explain why the game plays differently is to talk about Robo Warrior on the NES. Robo Warrior was developed by Hudson Soft under the title of Bomber King even in Japan to be a more action-oriented spin-off of their popular Bomberman series. Within that, you're going through stages in a linear fashion, finding keys to open doors and blowing up rocks to find power-ups. That sounds like this, doesn't it? Because this is a sequel to that. In Japan, this game is known as Bomber King Scenario 2, even lampshading that outright. What's happening here is something that happened with decent regularity back then. A game's title was changed in certain territories to help it push more units. This also namely happened with the Final Fantasy Legend games here in the States, because the Saga franchise name probably wouldn't have sold that well back then. Ultimately, though, there's no real difference between the Bomber King Scenario 2 or Blaster Master versions of this game. This game's also known as Blaster Master Jr. in Europe, by the way. It's ultimately just a difference of which tile screen do you want to look at. To their credit, compared to some other franchises that had this happen with, this game at least plays closer to top-down Jason-only Blaster Master sections than not, but the Bomberman routes are very clear just looking at it. It ultimately doesn't harm the game's quality too much. It's still a good game. It might technically be a worse Blaster Master game in some ways than Blaster Master 2, but it's still fine. Also, be careful with your other bomb types, which you cycle through with the select button, by the way. Your main bomb is unlimited, but the other bombs are, and you're going to want to hold on to those for certain boss fights or situations. Especially certain stages where there's a lot of rocks you need to clear out. Now, this is the first of the hidden rooms I brought up earlier, where along the top of the screen there are going to be points where if you place a bomb, you just open up a room that has a bunch of power-ups. Usually just has more of the usual stuff, life preservers, lamps, bomb types. But every now and then you might find something rarer in there, like the turbo boots or the power-ups for your buster that just makes you fire further. There's also one other power-up type, but they're notably rarer. Well, actually, no, there's technically two that are notably rare. One-ups are also relatively hard to come by in this game. Not that it really matters, because I want to say this game technically gives you infinite continues, because if you just press continue on the title screen, you're sent back to the start of the period you're in, more or less. So it's just a matter of war of attritioning it at the end of the day. The bigger annoyance in a lot of the stages is the enemies, as while they're relatively straightforward to take care of, either taking a single bomb or just a couple of gunshots, they spawn pretty much indefinitely and can sometimes just walk in from off-screen, making even walking around in the dark here a real pain, just because even if you know the level design, you don't know where an enemy might be. Some enemies are set, namely some that act more like hazards, but by and large, things like those skull spiders that blow up like bombs themselves, they'll just spawn from nowhere and can blindside you if you're not actually paying attention to what's around you at all times. Combat in this game, though, not much to worry about. The blaster is overall good for fighting, but bombs just do more damage. The biggest problem is, as I mentioned, bombs do more damage to you as well. So you need to be careful. Now, a moment ago, we got our first Force power-up. That changes Jason's design outright. There are 4 levels to it, and they stack, but if you die, you're reverted down a level. I want to say what actively changes whenever this happens isn't your attack power, but your defensive ability. I think the more force you have, the less damage you take, but I have no way of outright proving that because honestly, there's not much out there about this game when it comes to like game facts or research done. In fact, I don't even think I've checked what the speed run looks like. Let's check this out right now. Second boss, by the way, little dragon that falls onto you, fires some projectiles now and then. Same strategy, go with around the perimeter, place bombs, it'll walk into them probably and take a lot of damage. It is more proactive in attacking, but it's overall still a pretty easy boss. Let's see, Blaster Master Boy, what do you got, speedrun.com? Yeah, that's about what I expected. There is exactly one time by Bebo from 2 years ago, and it's about 40 minutes long. That's not too surprising, because honestly, Blaster Master as a series is only really talked about when it comes to the Zero trilogy and the original game. Occasionally you'll see some talk about Blaster Master 2 and the PlayStation 1 Blasting again. But otherwise, like this, the Game Boy Color version of Blaster Master 1, I think that was Enemy Below, and I want to say the one on Wii just isn't really talked about. Probably because there's not much too remarkable, or they're just other versions of Blaster Master 1 again. Now, the original Robo Warrior / Bomber King 1 was a co-developed game between Hudson Soft and the developer of this one, ICOM, but ICOM did this one completely on their own. And when it comes to like their solo ventures, it's one of the only notable games they've really put out that's not a shoot 'em up, outside of like Vice Project Doom, which was a Ninja Gaiden like on the NES. That company eventually was bought by Sammy, which is the company that parents Sega overall. But I think they later broke off, and alongside SNK became like Yume Kobo, where they didn't do a lot of note either from memory. Alright, period 3-1 is where the game starts to get a little cute with how many rocks they place in the level for you to blow up, to the point where it gets kind of almost near parody of Bomberman. These are the types of levels where either the super bomb that we just picked up is going to come in handy, or where you should just ignore blowing up a lot of the rocks and just focus on a few here and there to see if you can pick up any items, and then move on towards where the key is. But let's talk about the super bomb, because I think I used one coming up here. The super bomb works a bit like a normal bomb in that it blows up and it has a radius around it that gets completely exploded. But compared to a normal bomb, which is the block the bomb is on alongside the 8 surrounding tiles, the super bomb spreads out for about 8 panels total in any direction, taking up a giant square of space. It's absurdly good at clearing space. There's something I'm not too sure about though in the game, and that's damage values. I'm not sure if the other bomb types all do more or less damage than the standard bomb. For instance, the super bomb looks like it should do more damage, but I'm not sure it actually does. I know there are some bomb types that I think can technically do multiple hits on a boss, depending on invincibility frames partnered with the length of the animation going across the boss's sprite. But those are overall far and few between. Honestly, most of the standard stages shouldn't give you much trouble. It's really the few that require the use of the sub-items that could potentially give you problems in case you use them too willy-nilly or you don't do a lot of little harvesting from the rocks in some of the stages prior. And again, that's mostly just with the lamps. Hold on to those for dear life. There's a couple times where you can just enter one of the sub-areas that are all dark and just like walk around top to bottom near the stairs, and you'll probably grab at least an item or two, usually a life preserver, health restorative, or another lamp. They do like to do that general thing where if you have to use an item, there's one either nearby, or they give you another right next to it just to restore the one you just used. Because the items aren't randomly generated. They are always in the exact same place no matter what. Some games would probably make this random, but no, not this one. And for that, I'm thankful, because randomness in a game like this would make me tear my hair out. I've always had a bit of a weird stance on randomization in games, in that it either needs to be smartly randomized, or like zero randomization. Like, random luck drops in RPGs, good. Random dungeon layouts, not so much. It's kind of why I'm kind of soured on the whole mystery dungeon kind of game over the years. As while they might have good stories in them, I'm looking at basically every Pokemon mystery dungeon game there, they just get so samey after a while. One day I'll do an LP of Sky, at least, because Mystery Dungeon 2 is just that iconic for Pokemon, but that's an entirely different topic at that point. Also, I think I put a warning at the start of each video, but if you're prone to epilepsy, be careful with this one, as the few cutscenes get a little flashy, but if you also pick up certain things, like that lightning bolt item I just picked up, which completely clears the screen of enemies, the game likes to get a little flashy in some ways that I imagine could cause some problems. Mind you, it could have been a little less harsh on the original Game Boy screen due to that thing's size on top of, like, it just being those few shades of green, but if it's on anything else like the Super Game Boy or in the monochrome stuff, it hurts to look at even if you're not epileptic. So be a little careful there. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to continue through more of the game, getting through a few more worlds, and seeing where we go from there. See you guys then.